Welcome everybody to this panel. We're going to talk about organizing conventions. We are very lucky to have an international all-star multi-convention panel here to tell us about it. At the far end from me is Jukka Halme, a man behind multiple FinCons and Allcons, amongst many other things. So a venerable force in the Finnish science fiction fandom. Then next to him we have Riku Mikkanen, one of the organizers of Desukon, which is one of the wave of newer Finnish conventions that have started in the last few years. Then we have Sami Nikander, who's a former main organizer of this convention, Ropecon. Then next to him we have Peter Adkison, who's now running the GenCon organization, which I guess is the biggest and most beautiful role-playing convention in the world.
Well, I don't know most beautiful, but...
It's the most beautiful.
Yes, you're right. It's so beautiful.
Next to me, Larson Kasper has organized the Mittelpunkt conventions in Germany, which of course are shameless copycats of the Solmukohta Knutpunkt tradition. My only claim to fame in the con organization sector, aside from a little communications work for Ropecon, is organizing the Finnish Solmukohta in the year 2008. So maybe you guys, to start off, could tell a little bit about the conventions you've been organizing, because I'm sure not everybody here is familiar with all of them. So maybe we'll start from Jukka's end and work our way down here.
Oh, we do? Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, as said, Jukka Halme. I've been the chair of FinCon in 2006, 2009, and I'll be chairing next year's FinCon as well in Helsinki from 5th to 7th of July. Welcome. FinCon started in 1986 as a proper science fiction convention in a way that American and English science fiction conventions were at the time. Unfortunately, it had an admission fee and it failed miserably. So the Finnish science fiction fandom was in a turmoil for a couple of years, and then they decided that, well, we want to do this convention, but let's do something different. Let's do them for free. So in 1989, the first proper FinCon was held in Helsinki, which didn't have admission fee, and it has been thus since. FinCon is one of the largest European science fiction and fantasy conventions, which has its main point in literature. It's a literal science fiction convention. But it does have various other aspects to it. In the beginning, we had some gaming going on at FinCons, and I believe Ropecon, in a sense, was born from those programming items. At some point, we started doing anime, which then led to the cooperation of FinCon, AnimeCon, and at some point also various other anime conventions in Finland. FinCon has since started running separately from AnimeCon, and we're looking for another new thing to acquire. We don't know yet what, but who knows? Perhaps we go back to gaming. I don't know. What was the question?
I think you answered it quite well.
Okay,
People
yeah,
probably now have an overview of what FinCon is, in case they haven't been attending.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, my name is Riku Mikkanen, and I am one of the original members of Desukon. I've been working with Desukon since 2009, when we first held our convention. And mainly I've been doing marketing, partnership, and communications kind of work, but I've been involved in numerous odd jobs back in the day, so I'm basically a multitasker and very versatile in a con organizer way. But Desukon was started in 2008 because we thought that the FinCon AnimeCon was a horrible abomination, and it didn't serve anyone. we thought it was like, okay, we like anime, but it's like we're like slaves. And we love anime. We want to have a con just for anime fans. And so the idea was to make a con that's mainly for anime fans. And well, the original plans got a bit larger. We booked the Sibylis Hall in Lahti, which is one of the top European convention centers here. And after that, well, we held our first con in 2009, and it was a great success. And basically, it brought something new to the table. Like we were the first con to really utilize social media effectively. We had like admission fee, which was at the time one of the highest, and now when you look back, it's like one of the standards now in the con scene, especially in anime cons, to have an attendance fee of 10-20 euros. But as I mentioned, Desocon is mainly anime and manga. We strive to have at least 75% of all our programming in anime or manga-related topics. There's, of course, something like we have a lot of cosplay programming there. We have a cosplay contest, which is basically a qualifier for the European Cosplay Championships. And we have a video game room. So we basically try to serve all the core interests and the possible side interests someone like an anime fan would have. And, well, so far it's so good. We're holding our Desocons biannually. We have a Desocon Frostbite, that's in February. Yes, February. And then we have the main Desocon every June. And we have been sold out for like 3 years in a row, so there's a lot of people wanting to come to Desocon, but we can't hold them all. So we're basically one of the most successful cons at the moment, if I can say so myself.
Thanks. Hi everybody, I'm Sami Nikander, or Niksu as some of you might know me better. And I'm here for Ropecon. And since you are all here, I assume you have some basic knowledge of Ropecon as you are here. So I won't go through all the details, but we've been around since 1994. And as Jukka said, it was probably had something to do with like having a spin-off for gamers. It was definitely inspired by FinCon at least. Basically it was an idea from one gamer, Mikkanen, who had this crazy idea, hey, I'm gonna have a con, this thing called con, and wow, look what happened. We're still around after 15 years. My first con was in 1997, so I've been around for the most part, and I've been a multitasker as well. So I did this main organizer thing for a few years, but aside from that, I've done pretty much most of the odd jobs in our organization. And now it's my first time in a panel as well. I won't go into details about the programming, because I'm assuming you are aware of those.
But it is worth noting that of all the conventions here, Ropecon is the only one with its own theme song.
That will be changed.
Yeah, I'm Peter Adkison. I've run most of the conventions I've run have been in the United States, but not all. In 1992, I was the CEO of Wizards of the Coast, and we acquired the rights to manage the Origins convention. 1994. And we managed that convention from 1994 up through 2001. I didn't personally manage it. It was a department within Wizards. But I became quite aware of the convention business since I was obviously at the convention and behind the scenes and sort of overseeing how it was being run. And then in 1997, we acquired TSR, which owned Dungeons & Dragons and Gen Con. And so for the next 3 years, we managed Gen Con and Origins, both. And then we released, at some point, we released the rights to Origins back to the Gamma Trade Association, which owned it, once Origins became profitable and Gamma could run it themselves. Then in 2001, I left Wizards after I'd sold the company to Hasbro. And then a year later, I bought Gen Con from Hasbro. So, Gen Con, I really love Gen Con. I've owned it twice. So, it was that after what I bought Gen Con in 2002 and was, the owner, and it was the only thing that was the whole business. Then, of course, I was really running the convention and became very intimately familiar with it. And I've owned it ever since. I don't run it day to day anymore. Gen Con is currently run by a very close friend of mine named Adrienne Swartout. She's been running it since 2008. But while I was there, we also ran some smaller conventions. We ran a Gen Con in Anaheim called Gen Con SoCal. That's American slang for Southern California. We also ran Gen Con in London for 1 year. Lost a lot of money on that one and then decided not to go back. And we also ran Star Wars Celebration twice. So it's funny, I never really envisioned myself as being a convention organizer, but boy, I've organized a lot of them. So, and some of them have been really successful, and some of them have been just notorious disasters. So it's, but I think in the convention business, what you do is you are like a duck, calm and serene on the surface, and underneath the water, your feet are going like this. So that's what you strive for as a convention organizer.
Yep. So my name is Larson Kasper. I'm from Germany, and back in 1995, we started to have a convention just for LARP organizers, so very specific. And this convention was pretty boring, as we Germans like it, for like 10 years. And it also had a boring German name, Kampagne Mittellande, what is quite long and strong and stuff. And at some point I think it was in 2003, me and some other people, we decided that this shouldn't be like that anymore. And we want something different, but we didn't know what. And in 2004, I was in Sommerkochte and knew, yes, that's what I want. So, yeah, we kind of copied the Sommerkochte thing. What we actually did was a revolution, because we applied for the board, let us vote it to the board, and just made everything different from 1 year to another. What was a big oh my God, you can't do that, but then people got used to it very quickly. And now we have already a tradition since, I think, 2006, we have the first Mittelpunkt. So we just changed the old event in a new one. And we changed a lot. It's not only for organizers anymore. Any LARPer can come, or any role player if one, but it's mostly LARP themes, or topics. So mostly it's not interested for other role players, but they could come if they want. And yeah, I think we did a quite good job on that. Let's see what future will happen. I made it for 4 to 5 years in the main organizing crew, and then we all decided that let's give it to someone else. And in the first year it crashed down a bit, but now it's up again. So we just spread it to people, and we will do something different. Another revolution.
Okay, Solmukohta is quite an odd beast because it's a convention that is organized in each of the Nordic countries, going around in a 4-year cycle. So even the name changes. We have a Knutpunkt, Knutepunkt, as the Danes call it, and Solmukohta here in Finland. And
is it more like warrior?
And basically, the convention was born in '98 when, or probably born in '97 when a Finnish LARPer and a Norwegian LARPer met in Turkey and decided that this is probably not the easiest way to do it. And so the crazy Norwegians invited LARPers from all the Nordic countries into Oslo in 1998. I think probably 30 or 40 people attended that first convention, but saw that this could lead to something beautiful, and it's been getting bigger every year. The format has changed a bit sort of, it basically started just as a meeting point with very little formal programming, mostly consisting of people just coming together, sharing ideas in a very informal setting, which was of course easy when you have very few attendants. And it was also organized on a very shoestring budget. People would rent schools during the school's winter breaks and sleep on the floors of the classrooms. But later it has acquired quite a lot from the different conventions around the Nordic countries, because we've of course been in the wonderful position that every year when we go to one of the countries we can incorporate stuff from there and then move it on to the next countries. We've learned a lot from Ropecon in how to organize the program and have a lot of program like that, but it also has learned a lot from academic seminars, because the focus has always been on pushing the boundaries of LARP as an art form. So we've been very interested in academic research of role-playing and also in documenting what we're doing, because LARPs and tabletop games tend to be quite ephemeral as art forms if nobody actually writes down or takes photos of, or somehow documents what happens. So that's basically been the focus of Solmukohta in the last few years. And then of course always an important part has been the social aspect, the parties, drinking together with all of your friends from around the world. We call it a Nordic convention, but similarly to Nordic LARP, we don't think that the Nordic here actually strictly applies only to the Nordic countries, but rather it's a mindset of interested people from all around the world. We have participants from the United States, from all over Europe, and we have, I think the Germans were the first to come as a large group and a sort of consistent factor from outside the Nordic countries, but nowadays we have groups coming from Czechoslovakia and Poland and so on, year in and year out. So I think that's a pretty good overview of what we're sort of doing with the events, but because we want to talk about con organization, now I'd like to get some sort of basic numbers for the people here so they get a scale of what these events are, because the scales are quite different, I already know from my own experience. Maybe I'll start with Solmukohta, which probably is in many ways the smallest. When I organized it in 2008, I think we had about 230 participants. So more than an order of magnitude smaller than Ropecon, for an example. However, expensive to attend, because we've been running the conventions in a hotel recently, which is not the way it's usually done here in Finland. Still done very much on a shoestring budget, but depends a bit on the country where it is organized. Because in some of the Nordic countries, they are very successful in getting public funding for role-playing. Many of you have probably heard about Sverok, the roof organization for role-playing games in Sweden, which gets a lot of public money for role-playing, so they have more money to spend that way. Basically, I think when I did it in Finland, the budget for 220 to 230 people was around a little over 50,000 euros, most of which was gathered in participation fees. A little of it we got in sort of public grants. And Ropecon, which is organizing Solmukohta in the organizational sense, very graciously allowed us to make a few thousand euros loss when organizing Solmukohta. So in a way it can be said that it was also supported by Ropecon. And the way we organize it here in Finland is we have almost a miniature version of the Ropecon organization team. So usually it's one head organizer, then a very small committee around him, usually at least communications, accommodations, logistics, and then somebody organizing the info desk, which is all the sort of workers we have working during the convention here in Finland. And the info desk is run on a very small crew, so usually 2 people are available for sort of basic running jobs around the convention at any one time. So very much a miniature version of the Ropecon organization, and I think that it's interesting that it's scaled down much more in proportion than the amount of participants in the event, I think. So at least from that experience, it would seem that for a larger event, you tend to need exponentially more organizers as well. But I think probably the scales don't work that way in Gen Con anymore. Yeah, I think that's most of the basics of how Solmukohta is done. In some of the other countries, they have more crew because they are allowed to run their own kitchen. In Finland, the simple legislation of taking over a hotel kitchen is so complicated that we're glad to have the hotel run it for us.
Yeah, it's funny that you think that Solmukohta is the smallest. I think Mittelpunkt is even smaller. So in the last 10 years, we had, it was different from 100 to 200 participants. That was the range. So nowadays it's, I think, somewhere at 150, and it's rising up again. And we also have a lower budget because we don't get any funding in Germany for that. So we all have only have the participants' fees, and that means that we have the budget from 10 to 20,000 euros in these years every year. That's why we don't take a hotel, we take a youth hostel, and you can't take over youth hostel kitchen as well. So we have to take the kitchen from them, what is quite okay usually. And we have all these youth hostels on beautiful castles or stuff like that. So it's pretty easy to get a decent location for Lab Organizers convention in Germany. And yeah, we're pretty fine with the youth hostel solution. And we've been at the same place for some years. Then we changed place and been at that place for some years. And nowadays it changes every year to another city. What is a good thing from my point of view. Even though some of the cities totally messed it up and other do a brilliant job. But anyways, you can get over Germany. And yeah, we also have a quite smaller organization or help desk team. So it's more like on Solmukohta. We don't need that many people to organize all that stuff, but it's still a lot of work for those who do it. And that's also a good thing that it nowadays changes from city to city, because then the people also change a bit, and that doesn't worn out those people that fast. Was that it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Gen Con, let's see, when I acquired Gen Con, we were about 15,000 attendees, and that was in 2002, and last year we just hit 36,000 attendees, which is, we had a spectacular growth last year. We don't really know why. It was kind of inching up nicely over the last 10 years, and then, maybe 2%, 5% sort of growth, and last year it grew 20%. And we're really happy, but no idea why that happened. I have run, compared to that, I have run some smaller conventions, which I think would be smaller than Ropecon, let's say. 2,000 people, Gen Con UK, Gen Con SoCal, and Origins, when we took it over at Wizards, were at about the 2,000, 2,500 level. I volunteered for smaller conventions, but I haven't run one. One thing I'd like to say on the topic of attendance numbers is that I was in the business for many years before I realized that there are two ways of counting attendance. I would think, well, Gen Con feels pretty big at about 20,000 people, and then Spiel Essen is 150,000 people. Like, wow, but it doesn't feel like it's that much bigger, 20 to 150. Well, some conventions will count attendance by, if somebody comes to the convention for 3 days, they count that as 3 people. That's called turnstile attendance. So that's just something to know. My numbers, or unique attendance, I think, is what feels honest, and I think those are the numbers that we're all reporting.
Okay, some basic numbers. Number of attendees is at the moment somewhere around 3,000 plus, 3,000, 3,500. It's been, the peak year was about 5 years ago. I think it was 2007 when we reached almost 4,000, which was kind of very near of the situation of being sold out. As the venue just couldn't hold all of those. But I think the 3,000 is at the moment is what we are running at, and quite steadily. And I think in part the small drop from around 4,000 to 3,000 is due to that new wave of cons which have attracted a lot of people there, and yay for that. And I think there has been room for everyone.
I think there's been a marked drop in the amount of people coming who are basically anime fans and don't really role play at all. Yes. Now that we have a lot of anime conventions available.
Yes. It's been definitely that segment. And there are less of cosplayers around here nowadays, and so about the organization, we have a core team. Usually, the core team or the core committee has been around 20 to 30 people around, and usually including from one to 4 main organizers, depending on the year. And in addition, and that core team works more or less throughout the year, or at least about half of the year. And in addition, we have this staff of volunteer workers currently around probably 500 people, from 500 to 600, varying a little bit, but it's quite steady at the moment. And that's the basic figures about budgeting. We live in a shoestring budget as well, because we tend to rake in a lot of money in terms of tickets, but that's actually pretty much everything that comes in. Then we have some income from the vendors and stuff, but that's peanuts. So we take in the ballpark of something like over 60,000 euros, I think, per year around this. And basically all of it goes to the rental of this venue and various other expenses. We strive to have a small buffer each year, like to make a small profit from the event, so that we can actually support the role-playing scene in Finland in various ways. For example, we have been allowing Solmukohta to make a little net loss at some years and so on. But that's kind of the numbers for Ropecon.
I forgot to mention staff.
Yeah.
I didn't mention staff levels. I forgot that was part of the question. So we have 10 at Gen Con. We have 10 full-time staff that work the year round, and then we have about 500 volunteers. So it sounds similar to Ropecon, but we also probably, I think what I've seen around here is that you do a lot of things yourself that we contract out. So, like for example, we hire a decorator company to come in and put up all the tables and chairs and all the pipe and drape and mark out the exhibit floor and everything like that. We have an AV company that comes in and sets up all the AV everywhere. So there's a lot of things that those numbers, how many people they hire aren't included in those numbers. So I think the actual amount of labor does scale up probably kind of linearly. I don't think that there really is much of an economy of scale in the business. I think if you have a convention that's 4 times as big, it's probably 4 times as much work. Whereas some businesses, especially electronic businesses, scale up very efficiently. I don't think this business does.
I think it's probably also worth mentioning at this point, in case somebody doesn't know it, that Gen Con is run, I guess, on most American conventions on a slightly different model than the ones here, because you run it as a business, don't you? Yeah. And when you're talking about your full-time employees, you're paying them a salary. Yeah. Whereas, of course, the Finnish conventions are run as non-profit organizations, and when we organize the conventions, we usually lose money, at least in phone bills and gas bills when doing it, because I don't think any of us actually get to take any money home with them from the con organizations. So that's, I think, an important difference to underline.
We get a free lunch. So.
So how about Desukon?
Yes, well, Desukon is usually attended by 2,900 attendees, mainly because we can't fit any more people. Like in 2010, we had 3,183 attendees, and the house was packed full. It was really, really tight, so we had to cut down on attendees, and we settled on 2,900 attendees. So it's been very well. So there's a lot of people who want to come in, but we can sell them many tickets. So there's about 3,100 people around Lahti that have come for Desukon, and there's about 200 people who just hang around the convention area because they don't have the tickets or don't want to buy tickets. But regarding staff, our core group is about, well, let's say 30 people, and we have a volunteer workforce for about 80 people during the con, and we have 50 people in charge of programming, and then we have specialized tasks like interpreters and drivers and so on. They're like about 10 people, so it's about 200 people approximately who are working on our con. And regarding the budget issues, I asked yesterday that can I tell our approximate budget, and I was told I cannot, but let's just say we take in a lot of money, around 25,000 euros from sponsors, and then we take a lot of money from the ticket prices, and then we have a lot of merchandise to sell for sale, so we make a decent amount from that. And well, as you all said, what comes also goes, so we basically have two big points of expenses that are taking most of our money, and that's the first one is the convention center. It costs a lot of money. It's in around 30,000 euros, including staff. And then there's, of course, the second, which is the guest of honors. Like, they take a lot of money. And it's, well, you have to pay for flights for 5 people. You have to accommodate them. And
I want to go to your convention.
Yeah. You have to pay flights, and you have to give them food. You have to accommodate them, and you have to drink them at bars, and have to give them money. And so it's expensive. So that's mainly. But usually we make a bit of profit. So we're hanging on, and usually when we make profit, we aim to buy new hardware. So like 2 years back, when we made a huge amount of profit, we bought walkie-talkies, which are actually in use here for security staff. And we've been buying camera equipment, and we are like lending these around the country for cons to use. So we want to like give back to the community. So that's something we aim to spend money on. But yeah, we haven't gone bankrupt, so everything's fine so far.
FinCon is a bit different from most of these conventions, except Solmukohta, in the sense that FinCon changes venues and cities every year. There's basically 4 cities which hold FinCon. This year it was in Tampere, and next year in Helsinki. There are also cities of Jyväskylä and Turku that have organized FinCons more than once. Well, now every place have organized it at least 2 times. So, of course, that means that the budgets and the needs for the organizers are different from each city. I can talk the size and the sums of Helsinki FinCons, which are the largest, because Helsinki being the capital city and the whole metropolitan area, which naturally brings more people to the location. The budget of 2009, which was a FinCon Animecon, was around 60,000 euros, of which the money that we got came basically from 3 various venues. Government grants, which was roughly a third, and a third also came from sponsorship deals and stuff like that, and a third, well, the largest portion was, of course, the merchandise and dealers' rooms, which is a big deal, or used to be a really big deal at FinCon Animecon. We are looking a smaller revenue, the future conventions. As to the size of the con committee, again, Helsinki is probably the largest one. This next year we are attempting something new. We're looking for a tag team deals with. I have a co-chair, Henri Hakkarainen, I think your sister.
This is con organizing is very much a family business in Finland.
Yeah. And we're trying to have a person in charge of a specific thing, but there's also another person who can, in case of, step in. The core committee consists of, let's say, 12 people. I'm not hitting that off from the ballpark. There are some 20 additional committee members who do various other smaller things like flea markets or photography or whatever not. And as to the gophers, well, 2009 we have about 300 people running various smaller things. A very large portion of those people were from the anime side of things, the young people who came and were very interested in helping with running the convention by doing all the things that has to be done, but us old, I mean granddaddy aged people like myself don't really want to do anymore. Which was very nice, and it's been wonderful having those same people come to FinCons even if there is no AnimeCon attached to it. And again, what was the question?
I think you're covering it.
I'm trying, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think basically what we've seen in the last few years in Finland has been a lot of new conventions springing up, and it's also been nice that they've been springing up a little bit all over the country, so that the convention scene is no longer so Helsinki-centric. So with that in mind, if there's somebody in the audience now who's thinking of maybe starting a convention in his hometown, sort of, what would your sort of advice be on how to start building a convention? What's the first thing to do? What are the essential roles to get in your organization? Is it a one-man job or are more needed?
Well, I think he or she should really think what you want to do. I mean, do you want to run a role-playing convention? Do you want to run a science fiction convention? Do you want to run an anime convention? And what kind of a convention at that you want to do? Do you want to do another role-playing convention in, let's say, Oulu, which is modeled right after Ropecon? Not going to happen like this. Or a science fiction convention there, or even an anime convention. First, think what you are going to do, and then how much you are willing to commit to it. How much of your own money you are willing to commit to it. Probably not that much, unless you are very rich, which I think not that many are at conventions or convention running. I certainly am not. But yeah, and then think about the size, the venue. Well, and is there a need for it? I would very much think during the summertime another role-playing convention in the metropolitan area would not really work.
The first Gen Con was run by Gary Gygax in his home and had 50 people and zero budget. So, hey, it worked for Gen Con. It's a good... Oh, and plus 45 years.
Yeah, I think there's a good bit of advice there in that you don't have to start with 3,000 attendees. It's possible to make a much smaller convention and still get good stuff out of it. For example, Solmukohta, with its 200 or 300 participants these days, I think it still exerts a lot of influence. The 300 people coming there are people who are actively organizing games, organizing other conventions. So we we kind of get to spread the Nordic LARP message through sending 300 messengers out into the world and then reaching another order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude of people through them. I think my personal advice for anybody thinking of starting to make a convention is, if you haven't already done it, volunteer for one of the other conventions. It's probably going to be very difficult to start from scratch, and I don't think any of the Finnish con organizations have been in the habit of refusing anybody wanting to work for them. I think there's probably always room on the staff, and if you're eager to do it and demonstrate good communication skills, you can probably even work your way into the organization committee pretty quickly, because there usually isn't so much a competition for the spots as old veterans desperately trying to stay away and still getting roped into it.
For a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally agree with everything that has been said, but if I'd like to add something, maybe just that be brave, be courageous. You should definitely just start small and get some experience from other cons, but like, why do something that has been already done? That's how Ropecon got started. A guy got a crazy idea, hey, I'm going to have a role-playing convention in Finland. Weird, and it worked. So, try out something. You should have imagination and vision and some burning passion, I think. You won't have a con without passion.
Well, most of my points have been already said, but one thing should be said, that you should get the word out. Like, okay, so you're organizing a con, great, but who's coming? Well, you have to get the people there, so go there where your potential con-goers are. So if you're like arranging a role-playing convention, make some flyers and pass them out here. There's probably be some 50 people from Oulu who are interested. So get the word out, tell people you are, and the second most important part is that you have to get connections. So if you volunteer work in a con, you meet new people, so you should like stick to getting new connections, because basically having someone to rely on, like asking questions, so like, we're gonna do this, so how did you do that in your con? It's gonna help you 1,000,000 times better than just figuring out yourself. So the optimal situation would be that you'll have a mentor of sorts from another convention, but basically get the word out and make connections.
So I think I can agree on everything what has said until now. I come back to the question, who would be the first people I want to have in my team? So I think it's 2 people I want to have in my team. It's the motor and it's brakes. It's one guy who does network and has the idea and the patience to do it, and I want to do it. And there should be one who's doing all the money and calculating and stuff. And the one is the motor, the other is the brakes, and the motor will get everything assembled to the car that you will need. You will get the finest polish if you have a big motor, but you need big brakes if you have a big motor.
Yeah, I think also at least Ropecon and FinCon have been quite successful with the model of constantly revamping the organizing committee a bit, so that you have a mix of experience and new people coming in. So possibly also, if you want to be a con main organizer, you don't need to start your own con. You can take over FinCon or Ropecon.
Yes, no, I buy.
Or then you can buy one, yeah. But I guess you need to go to the States to do that, so. Maybe after the panel, Peter can set up price for you, but...
I'm not in the convention buying business anymore.
We already talked about the brakes and the motor. Sort of, we've used a lot of labels for sort of this organization stuff. The committee, the main organizer, but I'd like to get a bit behind the labels. Sort of, what do you see as the role of a main organizer in an event like this? Should he know a bit about everything that's being done in the committee, or should he focus on one aspect and have trustworthy lieutenants doing others, or something else entirely?
Well, for me personally, the qualities that have been important to me when being the main organizer is just to like spread the calmness. Just like Peter said, you have to appear calm on the surface, no matter what happens. All hell may break loose, but you will just have to act like and have this leadership. So we'll just stand on the bridge and appear very calm and organized, and you can think whatever by yourself about what's happening. But because it's just basic psychology, I think. In a disaster, event of disaster, panic spreads very easily, like a wildfire, and so does like an organization. So you just have to make everybody sure that everything is under control. Keep calm and carry on. Do your job, soldier, and everything actually works fine with that. It doesn't matter if if it's just a train wreck actually happening, but you just have to make it like look fun, a fun train wreck.
I think the thing I said most often when I was main organizing Solmukohta was in answer to some worried question about the availability or a venue or money or something like that, would be to say, don't worry, it's there, and then I'd go to the guy in charge of the money to ask, is it?
Yeah, that's something I wanted to mention. I think you should be calm, and you should be in a constant situation of making people believe that everything is all right, but you also have to make decisions. If people come to you, you have to make a decision. It's not important if that decision is in the aftermath, if it's right or wrong. You just have to make it in this moment, and you have to make it like everyone else would say, yeah, that's the right decision for now.
You should also trust your workforce, your staff, because like when I see a main organizer, an ideal main organizer is someone who has an overview of what's going on, and all the so-called lieutenants are doing like the hard work, and the main organizer should strive for absolute trust in his lieutenants, because basically if you have to do everything, like you're always micromanaging, no, you gotta write that again, no, we write it again, it's not gonna work. The main organizer doesn't have the time to do everything, so basically an overview of what's going on, and leave the work to the experts who have been hired to do the hard work.
Assuming they're competent.
Yeah. Yes, that is actually very important, to have competent staff. So basically a good main organizer also has the sort of an eye for people, so he knows who's a risk and who's a great asset to the whole con effort.
When I set up my team for Solmukohta, I said that our goal together is to make a good Solmukohta. And then when we had sort of divided the responsibilities, I explained to the people that these responsibilities are your individual goals. You're in charge of the money. Your goal is to make sure that we have enough money and that we don't go over the budget so much that Ropecon will get mad at us. You're in charge of the logistics. Your individual goal is that we have everything we need. And my individual goal is to make sure that all of you people doing this stay sane and happy during the process. I think that for me was the single biggest responsibility of the main organizer, because I mean, theoretically, if something goes wrong, I could jump in and probably save that section, but it's much easier if nothing goes wrong in the first place, and the original person who was in charge gets to see the project through and actually is happy with it and will organize something again.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to add anything to these answers, because that is the role of the main organizer, is to overview the whole thing. You might have a portion of things that you would like to do, like myself, I'm going to be the head of programming again, because I like the programming part. I like developing programming. I like to be involved with the programs and the program participants. But for example, money, I like money. I like to go to work and to get money, and I really like that the convention would have money. I am not that keen into acquiring money, even though I have been forced to do so in the past few years. Last time we had a bit of a problem that one of our organizing committee members, who was in charge of 2009 for sales, had to drop out, and his duties were divided among 3 people, of which I was one. And as the main organizer, you also have to be the one that can step in. And like the next year's thing that we have these tag teams, we are trying to figure to make it so that everybody, if they fall out for reason or another, would have a backup that would be easy to take the charge of the whole thing. But yeah, positive reinforcement. That's your duty as the chair.
So I think part of this job is understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I know for me, I'm not good at managing detail. I'm good with people and good with strategy but I don't like doing the numbers, and I don't like managing really complex processes and being that person that makes these decisions very quickly on how to do stuff. So what you can do, if you understand where your strengths and weaknesses lie, you can make sure that you have within your team strong people in the places that you're not, and you can be flexible on what this organizational structure is. So if you think, well, I'd really like to organize a convention, but I don't think that I'm good under that pressure, maybe you partner up with somebody who is good under that, but who maybe isn't so good with the public. So you know, anyway, there's different scenarios. There's not just one way to do it. Like if you're taking a traditional business, you know, CEOs that run businesses can come up through sales and marketing side, through the product side, through the financial side, legal side. There's all different career paths that can lead to a person in charge. And I think that same thing can apply in convention organization. So just know yourself and staff accordingly.
I also think that it's an important point about the organization being flexible, because when you see the sort of personal resources available to you, it's not necessarily to try to fit them into an artificial mold. You can sort of find roles that fit people, so that, for an example, in 2004 in Solmukohta we had a separate person doing PR and communications. Then in 2008 it seemed a bit difficult to find that person. Then again, I as the main organizer have a strong background in communications. It's what I do for a living. So why try to get somebody unwilling to do the PR and communications for a fairly small convention if the main organizer is a communications professional himself? I mean, you don't need to sort of pigeonhole people into artificial holes just to fill some imaginary slot on an organization chart.
And speaking of backups, one important point is to think about who's the backup for the main organizer. Will the con just not happen if you get burn out or whatnot? If just even if you are not just burned out, but you have just too much on your hands, will you have somebody to back you up? And that's a thing to ponder.
Yeah. It's also, I think, what I've learned, it's also good to have, in addition to a backup, sort of a safety valve for a main organizer, because as I said, when I was main organizing, I saw it as my responsibility to keep the team happy. And this year, when Solmukohta was in Finland again, I sort of decided that I'm now retired from the con organization business. I'm not going to be a part of the committee, but there is one thing I will do. Whenever the main organizer this year feels stressed, she is free to call me, and I will meet her in a bar, and I will buy her a beer, and I will listen to all her woes, and I will give her as much advice as I am capable of doing. And we ended up doing that a few times during the process, and I think it helped a lot. So what I think we've all gathered from this panel is that con organization, it takes a lot of work, and depending on the size of the event, it can be quite a big responsibility. So what's your motivation for doing it? Because at least the Finns are not doing it for the money, and I doubt that even you are getting considerably wealthy through Gen Con. So what's the motivation for getting into con organization?
Give it back to the community. That's one of the main motivations for us. We want to build a con that's made for people who like the same things that we like.
Yeah, kind of forced the community to get to new stuff and to redefine themselves. So that's what we want to do at Middelpunkt, and I think that's similar to Sommerkorte.
I think for me, I had a wonderful role in the gaming industry in the 90s, with Wizards of the Coast, and did a lot of awesome things like Magic and Dungeons and Dragons and Pokemon. And then when that was over, there was this vacancy in my heart. I wasn't involved in the industry, but to be honest, I was burned out on publishing. I mean, after doing it for 11 years, I just didn't want to do publishing anymore. And never had any interest in retail or distribution, but I always loved Gen Con. I mean, I just love it. I grew up reading Dragon Magazine and seeing the reports about cool stuff happening at Gen Con. I mean, as a child, I was seeing this. So when I had the opportunity to acquire it, I did it out of love of the event and an opportunity to stay relevant to hobby games. And it was the smartest thing I've done since the 90s, and I really treasure it. So for me, it's love.
Yeah, I guess for me it's pretty similar in that there are two fixed points in my annual calendar, and they are Ropecon and Solmukohta. So it has been very natural for me to want to organize these events as well, to make sure that they carry on and keep happening.
I believe it's the cool title. But I'm thinking of changing the chair into a throne. Throne would be good. I'm the throne of FinCon.
Yeah, I was also. I wanted to be the king of Solmukohta, but Ropecon organization wouldn't allow it. So.
Yeah, well, silly people. No, obviously, it is the love of the thing. When I was living in the States, I visited some local science fiction conventions, and the one that stuck to mind was LunaCon in 2002, where I spent most of the time at the Gophers room, just helping out, making food and distributing stuff. LunaCon 2002 in Rye, or whatever they call it, the upper New York state. Yeah, and that was fun. Just I didn't see much of the convention. I was able to talk with some of the guests of honors because they wandered there while looking for the green room, but. Those fun meeting a couple of famous authors whom I have admired for a long time. But just to be there, I mean, when last weekend was FinCon in Tampere, and all the staff members wear this wonderful, I believe this is something bluish, and I was there as a gopher. I was taking part in panels and whatnot, but most of the time I was just doing gophering. I was sat behind the info desk and helped carry out stuff. And because it's fun, when you get into the convention site and you meet at least one person you have met before 10 years ago, way back there in wherever, and you realize, hey, it's the same feeling that brings out the convention juices flowing, and there you are. They have this programming, they have these guest of honors, they have these dealers room and everything, and it just clicks in a good way.
Yeah, I think Jukka has a valuable point there, that you can get a lot out of conventions, sort of doing even little things there. So if you're not interested in getting into the organizing committee, try just once, if you haven't had it, to take one shift of work at a convention and see how you like it. It's what I'm doing these days. I always try to do something little, even if it's organizing just one panel, because I feel a part of the convention in that way. And there's one role-playing convention in Denmark, Festival, which actually makes everybody attending do something little. It's a very sort of collective effort in that every participant is expected to do some little thing. Maybe it's 1 hour of walking the halls and seeing that there's no trash lying around, or helping to clean the tables at one meal, some small thing like that. And from what I've heard, it's working wonderfully. Nobody objects to this, and everybody feels a part of the event because they're all making it together.
Yeah, to the question, what do I get out of it? It's the same that you just described, even though it's not required or mandatory from the participants. But Ropecon has always had this kind of semi-official slogan of that it's an event made by gamers for the gamers themselves. So there is no, it's quite an artificial line between like organizers and attendees. We don't want to think of it as that way. It's just we are just a bunch of gamers, and we are doing this for us. So it would feel to me to be an outsider if I didn't do anything. One year I tried. I paid for my ticket, and it ended up being very boring. So by Sunday I started to actually clean up the place and help the logistics guys because I was so bored. And so it just seems.
I'm sure that's a compliment.
The con wasn't boring, but.
Have you talked to some professional about that? Do you think it's an addiction?
It's an addiction, all right? Yeah.
So, sort of still on the topic of advice to con organizers, during the time you've been organizing, do you have some do's and don'ts that are now obvious to you when you've been doing this stuff, but perhaps weren't obvious sort of before, sort of pitfalls you could easily imagine a beginning organizer sort of falling into, or some very good advice that you think that is maybe not obvious until you've tried this out a few times?
So don't plan to put money in that convention. You will do, but don't plan on that.
But make sure that there's a little extra in your bank account when it happens.
Absolutely, it will happen, but don't plan on it.
Do look out for new ideas. Always strive to improve your con. There's always something you can improve on. But don't listen to the old farts. They're usually saying that, yeah, we tried that back in some con in 2002, and they're saying it didn't work. Don't listen to them. Just do it.
Yeah, old farts in 2002. Yeah, I remember. I was, well, yeah. No, listen to old farts. Don't necessarily do the way they want you to do stuff, but make them happy. They like to be listened to. Yeah, but it's true. I mean, new ideas are always welcome, and new ideas should be implemented. But there are a few good things about some of the old stuff because they've been tested and people seem to have liked them. But yeah, new ideas is always good.
Dates and venue. Those are two really important things to get right. Pick the right dates, pick the right location, and the contracts related to that location will be the foundation for your entire cost basis. Now I'm speaking, that might be very different here, but I know from personal experience, the biggest mistakes we ever made were choosing the wrong date or the wrong venue, and ended up impacting our attendance or our attendance of attendees or attendance of exhibitors because of conflicts with other conventions or bank holidays or subway strikes. Well, we couldn't have predicted that one. Or picking the wrong venue and finding all sorts of hidden costs. So when I say pick the right venue, that goes hand in hand with the contract with the venue and really understanding what all the costs are that are involved. And this is one place where I highly recommend getting somebody to help you who has done these types of contracts before. And I imagine, I believe from the short time I've been here in Finland, that I think any one of these gentlemen would be happy to help you, who would look at your venue, potential venue contract, and tell you what to look out for and what sort of hidden costs and things you should ask for in that contract. So, and that's very practical sort of stuff as opposed to others. But
I would like to add something on that. Have written contracts or email.
Exactly. Yeah, and then check it, check everything, and then double check it, and preferably someone else can check it too.
Yeah. And also, if you're a main organizer, please don't procrastinate. I know you like Left 4 Dead. You want to play Left 4 Dead, but please do your job, then play. So have priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add to this what Riku said earlier about not listening to old farts or ignoring that, but it's been tried. We have noticed that there is a concept of time immemorial, or miesmuisti in Finnish, which is exactly 2 years. So if you want to have a new way of things, a new way of doing stuff, or a new idea, you have to keep doing it for 2 years, and after that, it's taken as a fact of life. The same goes also for bad ideas. So if you spot a really, really bad stuff happening and you want to get rid of it, do it before it's the third time, because 3 is a charm.
I think something that's being alluded to here is that in business there's a thing called learning curve, where every time you repeat something, you learn it and get more efficient at doing it faster and more economically. One of the challenges of the convention business is that since most conventions only happen once a year, I know there are exceptions, but in general, your learning curve, each instance of that learning is a year apart. And so it can take a lot of linear time to get good at this, at the business, where if you're making a widget, every week, you're going to go through those instances a lot more quickly. So it's just something to be aware of and sort of value highly each instance of the convention and try to learn from it as much as you can, because you don't get to repeat it for another year.
I think my main advice would be to expand a bit on what Larson said first, sort of don't plan on making a loss, because you will anyway, is to have buffers in everything, but then not to rely on them until you have to. So that, for example, in deadlines, if you know that something must absolutely be done by some date, then depending on the magnitude of that task, set the deadline a week earlier or 2 days earlier or something like that, and then actually use that deadline, not the fallback date, but the deadline that you've set. Sort of have the buffer and don't rely on the buffer until something really drastically goes wrong. The same with budgeting. Have, if at all possible, in your budget actually a column sort of surprise costs or something like that, and depending on the size of the event, put 1,000 euros or 2,000 or 3,000 euros there. I mean, with the Solmukohta in 2008, I asked Ropecon how much loss can we make, then budgeted into making half that loss, and ended up making exactly the amount of loss we were allowed to make because of these surprise costs. And be also very aware of what the parts in your organization are that are gonna affect the costs of running things and how they scale. Because, for example, with Solmukohta, since we were basically subsidizing every attendant through grant money and the sort of loss allowance from Ropecon, and spending almost all of our money on the hotel, this led to a very strange economy of scale in the fact that the more popular the event became, the more money we were losing, because basically we were losing money for every attendant. And so we needed to be very aware of this fact, because it's a very dangerous curve if a certain sort of threshold is...
Talk about elitism.
Okay, can I say something to that? So I usually, when I do a calculation, I calculate I try to calculate that all the basic costs that will be the same either way how many participants we have, that they are based, that they are done with a minimum amount of participants. So each participant that comes extra will get money into the system. Yeah, but I have a last from me personal advice is if you want to organize a convention, eat, drink, sleep, and tell that to every of your volunteer workers or paid worker or whatever. Eat, drink, sleep.
And shower.
Yeah.
It's also good to tell that to your attendants, which I think leads me to, I think we can sort of conclude this organized part and leave a lot of room for audience question. But my one last question would be, what would be the thing that you wish from the attendance in your convention?
Besides showering.
So I would ask them to be, is it reliable? So that they should take care of whatever they do. So if they break something, tell us. Or if you see something, do it. Clean some things up or get a new roll of paper, toilet paper if it's empty and stuff like that. So do something if you see something.
I think, bring a lot of fun energy. The convention is, there's only so much the organizers can do. I mean, we can do what we can to create that attitude, but really, if it's a fun convention, it's a fun convention because of everybody who's contributing and running games and having a good time. And so I think if you can inspire that from within by having a convention committee that has fun and is seen to have a good attitude, that will spread, and hopefully the attendees will do the same.
I'd say participate. Don't be a spectator. Do it.
And if you're having fun or participating, please be polite and respectful to others. Like, you can ruin someone's day really badly by being really rude in a con.
I think it's very nice to get feedback from the participants, both in the bad and in the good. I think it's very good that people demand things from the event, as long as they're reasonable in doing it. If something is wrong, it's very good to complain, as long as you remember that the person who might have screwed up this, or things have gone wrong because of something that's out of control. Anyway, the person in charge is probably a volunteer who has worked long hours in addition to his job or studies to try to get things done for you. And then the more important thing is usually the con organizers hear about everything that went wrong, but very few people to bother telling about the things went right. So it's always nice to hear if you've actually enjoyed something, and it's actually good for you as well, because then we will know to do that the next time as well.
Yeah, positive feedback is often lacking, so whenever it's possible, please do that. And enthusiasm, be enthusiastic about the programming items you go, or the games you're going to play, or the things you're going to see. That's it enhances your enjoyment as well. And then please buy stuff. I think most con organizers like to see more money from you guys and gals.
So now we have time for audience questions, and at this point I'd just like to advertise the fact that Peter Adkison is going to talk about the history of Gen Con in, I think, this very same space at 2 o'clock. So if you're interested in Gen Con, that's a wonderful opportunity to hear more about that. Yeah. Okay, so we'll start from there. Important reminder to not reinvent the wheel, and listen to the old farts, but don't necessarily obey them. And there's another.
Unless it's a really, really cool wheel.
the question was experiences with bad organizers, what can happen and what to do in that case.
I had this tech gopher in 2000, Mikko Perpila or someone. Actually, he was a very good gopher. So.
I think for me personally the main problems I've encountered in the stuff that I've been more involved with have been personal chemistry problems, which are always going to be a problem in a large enough volunteer organization.
3 or more.
And of course, I think what's important is to be very proactive in taking care of them, because if you let them escalate and fester, you will eventually reach the point where something doesn't get done or you need to get rid of people, and neither of these are very nice options in a volunteer organization. It's very difficult situation if you have to kick somebody out of a volunteer job, because at that point everybody is going to feel like crap. So for me, the big thing there is if you see personal problems sort of starting to happen, try to get them sorted before they escalate. I've been lucky enough that in the stuff that I've been doing, people have been reasonable enough that once we've seen the problems, we've been able to maybe shuffle the team around a bit, do something that's taken the worst of the tension out.
That's a thing you should expect as a head organizer. It will happen sooner or later that you will have some kind of festering human relations problem. And the nasty thing is that most of us aren't trained for human resources stuff. So it's not in our training to actually handle those cases, but we will have to at some point. And I have no specific advice, but how to actually handle these concrete cases. But you just have to be prepared and maybe think beforehand. What will I do when this kind of stuff happens? And I think it's necessary to think of how to actually kick out a person out of the team at some point. Even though it's not nice, but you have to think about it in advance.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. You mentioned it's painful for everybody. My experience is that it's often the opposite. If there's somebody in the group who's just an asshole or is lazy, or just, that usually the rest of the team's happy to see the problem taken care of. You feel sad for the person, but you know that if this person is doing damage to the organization, then it's hurting everybody to have that person in there. And so they need to be either, if not moved out, or moved to a different job. And sometimes it will work. Sometimes somebody who's bad at one type of job can excel in another type of job. But if it's a chemistry problem, there's usually only one answer.
Yeah, I think it's important to specify so that you don't get the wrong idea that what I maybe meant is that it can be painful in that moment. It can be a difficult moment telling that person that they have to go. But if the situation is bad enough, it's worth to take that moment of pain for then making things easier in the long run.
You have to have the guts to say that no, you're not going to work for our con, because, well, the longer the problem stays in your committee, your staff, it's going to be a bigger thing to kick it out. So you have to take care of it as soon as possible when you think it's the right thing to do.
And I know it's emotionally very difficult. And what I do when I'm in that situation is because it's natural to feel sadness for the person that you're confronting. I imagine everybody else who will benefit from the decision being behind me, sort of encouraging me to do what needs to be done. And that gives me, that visualization gives me the emotional strength to deal with the problem.
So from my point of view, most bad organizers are not bad organizers, or most bad volunteer helpers are not bad volunteer helpers. Mostly, from my point of view, it's a communication problem. So tell people what went wrong, because if I think I do a pretty good job, but everyone else doesn't think, and I don't know. So communication is very, 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 very important, and try to do it in a professional way and not in like, you're an asshole. If you can't solve the problem with the communication, like in 1 or 2 times, then I think you should get rid of people. But try it first like that, and usually it works pretty well. You will solve like 80 to 90% of the problems like that.
And as always, our prevention is more efficient than curing a problem. So pay attention to your recruitment process. And we've actually been in Ropecon. I've encountered many times that it's good and healthy to actually ask people before when you're assembling the team, which we do after Ropecon in every autumn. The new head organizers start to assemble the team. You should actually ask just bluntly, do you think you will get along with this guy? Can we put you in the same tag team or not? And it might sound a rude thing to ask, but it's a hell of a lot better option than actually run into problems later. And this kind of prevention has worked, for me at least, many times.
And it might not just always be because someone doesn't get along. Like, do some risk assessment, like go out and ask, like, how's your personal life? Because most of the times when someone isn't getting along with someone, it just might be that he's had a problem with his or her girl, boyfriend or something, or job is giving them a lot of trouble. So basically do some risk assessment and check out their background before you start to recruit them, so that they won't start to be a burden on your team.
Actually, Mikko, did any of these guys answer your question?
Not really.
No.
You showed me about the experience.
Yeah. We lost a guest of honor once. He went AWOL for 24 hours in Paris. His wife got here, but he did eventually, but we just got an email saying, yeah, I'm in Paris. Okay.
Well, I might be able to answer the question somewhat as asked, because, like, well, we've had a few organizers that had a big problem with telling other people, like, what they're doing. Like, there's a lot of info that we need from them. Like, we have to put out the program out, we have to make the guest of honor programming, we have to put the schedules for so-and-so going on. And, well, they were doing their job, but they were, like, really, really, really closed. They didn't tell anyone. They didn't want to share their plans. They just told, bam, here's the whole thing. Oh, and you have to do that, like, until tomorrow. So that was one of our bad experiences. And when we began the con, we had a lot of fighting between certain people, which was really much a big burden. And because of that fighting, it really much almost destroyed the con, because 2 people and their friends didn't get along. So those were not really the optimal organizers we wanted to have.
Some of these events I've run into, they have some confidentiality issues, so I'm not going to specifics, but in some cases the prevention that I mentioned was the best cure, that at least we have, at least the next year we won't have the same problem. So yes, I've run into cases where somebody has just been incompetent or couldn't handle their job. In that case, well, the only thing to do is just that the main organizers, they have to act as backups, or somebody has to step up. So I've been in situations where we have, like, made field promotions just a few days before Ropecon, and we made somebody basically responsible for some stuff that somebody else couldn't do. Or you could just, as a head organizer, just to cover up for somebody who's incompetent or missing or AWOL or whatnot. And the next year, you could still have used for those people who weren't able to actually handle their jobs. They might be better off in some other part of the organization, maybe some other type of job, or maybe a little bit less responsibility. Sometimes the limit is very hazy.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to answer your question with concrete examples because of these confidential issues, and I think a lot of people would not be happy if I named names. But I think there's one concrete example I can talk about without upsetting anyone, which was the organization of Solmukohta 2000, the first Finnish Solmukohta, because there was a lot of problems in organizing that event. It's probably the most painful event in organizing for me personally, and I actually had to leave that team. I happily did it early enough, sort of noticed that I can't be a part of this and told everybody that I'm sorry, I can't do my job here. I helped sort of a little from the outside of the team with the best of my abilities, did a website for them and tried to help, but I couldn't be a part of the main organizing committee anymore. And the two things that were a problem there were the whole team was so inexperienced, unsurprisingly, being the first Solmukohta in Finland, that personal issues were not taken care of in time, so that there was a lot of sort of grumbling and infighting in the team. And then the other problem was that nobody in the team, me included, was good enough to recognize sort of early warning signs of really bad stress that leads to people leaving stuff undone. And that's one very concrete piece of advice I can tell you, because people who are getting burned out, people who are getting stressed out, the reaction is not always to start telling people that I have a problem. The reaction is to hunker down and try to take care of everything and stress even more, and nothing gets done. So if you have a member in your team where you ask how things are going, they say they're going fine, but they don't offer any details on what they've done, sort of what they're getting done. I mean, it can just be somebody who, that's their style of work, but it can also be a very good early warning sign of somebody being stressed out and not taking care of their job. So try to always have an ear for sort of, are people giving you details on what they're doing, and try to ask for these details. And then if they're not forthcoming, that's something you need to start putting an eye on, sort of, is this person just doing something and not telling anybody, or is he so stressed out that he's actually not doing his job? The question was dealing with traditional media and how to benefit from media. We actually, I think, did quite a big pioneering job with Solmukohta 2004, where Mikko Pervilä was the main organizer, and me and Jaakko Stenroos were doing PR and communications. And one of the things we did different from previous times, we made a very conscious effort to get a lot of media attention for the event. It was a decision we made early on, and we made a very conscious effort to do it differently from what had been done before, in sort of very consciously representing role-playing as an art form and a culture instead of something for the kids to do. And what it takes is you have to have a clear plan of what you're trying to do. We had this plan. We want to get into the culture pages of Helsingin Sanomat, not the youth pages of Helsingin Sanomat, the biggest newspaper in Finland. So that was sort of set these concrete goals, and then you need to work very hard for them. We sent out, I think, 5 press releases in the run-up to Solmukohta, and I think the 4th one finally led to interview requests, and then you need to be able to fill those interview requests. So immediately before the convention, me and Jaakko, we went to be interviewed on radio and did stuff like that, and Mikko was available for questions from the media, so we very consciously were there then to serve the media once we had gotten the attention. And that, combined with efforts from Ropecon in the years previous and following, led to, I think, a radical shift in the public perception of role-playing in Finland, because we did make the cultural pages of Helsingin Sanomat that have been staying there ever since. So it's very worthwhile, I think, to go for media attention, but you need to plan how you're doing it, you need to be very disciplined in doing that plan, and it's a lot of work. I mean, that's what they pay me in my full-time job, just to be available for the media and make the effort of reaching the media. So if you're gonna go for a heavy media thing in your convention, you definitely need to have at least one person responsible for media relations and at least almost nothing else, because it's a full-time job.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that really help you. If you arrange a convention in July, that really helps. I mean, let's say, for example, Helsingin Sanomat. They don't have really anything to report on July. So if you arrange, let's say, a convention, they will most probably do a story of you. Now, if you happen to have a guest of honor who is known in this country, let's say, I don't know, George R.R. Martin, and he's one of your guest of honors, they might do a pretty big spread on it. They might do the front cover of the culture section, or in his case, they also had him on the front page, aka the third page of the magazine, which with a big picture, which really helps you to in the future to let everyone know we're this big. We were in the cover of Helsingin Sanomat. Okay, well,
that was
we
also
might give you money for that.
George R.R. Martin's first time as the page 3 girl.
Yes. Yeah. What else? Yeah, you need to have a PR person in charge of PR. Yeah.
The question was, are we talking short term or long term? I think that it's a combination of both. If you do get the media attention and want to do something with it, you need to maintain it from year to year. It's one short burst is quickly forgotten, but also you can't start the short burst from scratch. I mean, when I say that we did a lot of pioneer work with Solmukohta 2004, I'm not trying to take credit for getting role-playing through in the media, but that was sort of a breakthrough year, but it was built on 5-6 years of previous conscious effort to get role-playing into the media, either from the Ropecon organization or the main Finnish LARP organization and organizations like that. So it's definitely, it's a marathon combined with short sprints in the middle.
Yeah, I would like to add a small thing on that. What's also a good thing is embedded journalism. So that's what we did on a LARP. So I go from the roleplay convention to LARP now, just for explaining that. We had a TV from German television. We had a TV crew with us on a big LARP in Germany in 2004 for like 5 days, and they had been there with us 24/7, slept in our tent. When we went for a pee, they went for a pee. When we brushed our teeth, they brushed their teeth, and that went to be a pretty good report about LARP. I think you can adapt that somehow to a roleplay convention, but because they had the fun, they went with us and saw all the fun the people had, and they had the fun, and that reflected in the TV thing they made out of it. It's not a movie picture. What is it? A TV, not a series.
Documentary.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's also one of the things about working with media is contacts are very important there. So if you don't happen to have somebody with experience in PR or journalism on your team, Finland being such a small country, you certainly know somebody like that, and they will have contacts to journalists. Ask them to help you with those at least if they don't want to do anything else. Email a few journalists they know and tell about this thing, because in the big press offices, they can get 100, 200 press releases every day. It's very difficult to stand out from that sort of constant stream of information coming in. If you have a direct contact to a journalist coming from an email address that he knows, it's much more likely to get read. So good contacts are a very good way of getting through in the media. We have time for a few more questions. Question was how to take care of continuity, because the conventions are organized only once a year, and especially with the volunteer staff might change, stuff gets forgotten, people might repeat the same mistakes every year, so how to prevent that?
Well, we usually we try to prevent that the continuity doesn't fall by making all of our organizers make a plan, like a year before, and if they were to leave after that year of organizing, we also gather a lot of internal feedback. So when a new person comes in, they take the plan, they take the internal feedback, and then they see what works, what didn't work, and they can improve on that. So that's how we usually do it. And usually we tend to give the new people a somewhat free will to do what they want with it, but we give them as tools for them, so they can like improve on their existing plans.
We have a set of few choice like tricks up our sleeve for that. Firstly, we have these henchmen, concept of henchmen, that for every, basically with strive to have a henchman, kisälli or oppipoika in Finnish, for everybody in the core organizing team. In most cases this is viable to have somebody to help you out, and they will sort of learn in the process, and they will often step up as the successor when the previous ones retire. Then in recruitment, there's this importance in finding the right balance between the old veterans, the old farts, and the newbies, and keeping the right mix so that we will not lose too much knowledge every year. And then simply documentation. We ask. We also have a plan, like advanced plans, but more importantly, we ask for a debrief from everybody in the core committee. So they will have to break down what went wrong, what went good, what will we do next year, and just a few lines will be enough to avoid the most obvious pitfalls.
Yeah, if you think that the continuity is a problem, if you have an annual event, try the solmukohtaan size where we do it once every 4 years. There, I think the most important thing is communication between the different hosting countries, because we've in Finland been lucky the last few years that we've had a fairly good overlap of old guys coming in and new guys coming in every year, and the old organizers have usually been available for advice. But especially in some of the other countries during the 4 years, there's been a complete overhaul of the organizing team, so that we've had like an entirely new group of people organizing the convention in a new country. So for them, it's very valuable to have the resources of the other 3 countries available to them in terms of getting advice, maybe even getting help with getting the funding done, stuff like that. So with the 4 years, it almost becomes a matter of reinventing the wheel in some ways every year. It's also a resource in some ways, because we get much easier to get to do new stuff, sort of try new stuff, because people come in with a very fresh perspective on organizing the convention. Okay, I think it's now time to stop, so thank you everyone.
Ropecon.